They had watched humanity for years, charting their growth with clinical interest. The Ilyari Council, architects of a thousand-year empire, had cataloged dozens of emergent species before, every emotion, reaction, and tactical instinct reduced to data. And humans? They were violent, certainly, but so was every sentient life form in its infancy. What puzzled the Ilyari was not the violence, but what followed it. A human fleet had returned from a failed defense. One of their colonies, 3,000 souls, had been erased, vaporized without a warning. Surveillance drones captured the survivors' return. There was no retaliation, no immediate mobilization of weapons. Instead, there were ceremonies, processions, music. They stood in silence. Some wept openly. To the Ilyari, this was not strength. It was an evolutionary cul-de-sac. Curator Vec studied the footage. "They feel too much," he said, his voice clicking in the Ilyari tongue. "They are unstable." The others scoffed. "They will be easy to break," High Analyst Shul replied. "Emotion clouds judgment. These humans invest energy in the dead instead of securing the living. It is inefficient." But something bothered Vec. In the footage, he'd seen a commander place his hand on a soldier's shoulder, not as a command, but comfort. The soldier nodded, wiping away a tear. And they stood in formation, still grieving, but steady. The council continued to debate statistics. Projected responses. The likelihood of war escalation. Vec listened, but the numbers fell hollow. Something in that footage, something about how those humans had grieved, disturbed him. And more, it intrigued him. Ilyari culture knew no such response. Death was logged. Loss was cataloged. There were no funerals, no markers. A soldier who fell was removed from the registry and replaced. Emotion, in their eyes, had no strategic value. So why did it feel like the humans were stronger for theirs? Later that cycle, an emergency session of the council was called. A stealth operation, one they had sanctioned, had successfully destroyed a second human colony. Another clean kill. 0 survivors. Still no retaliation. Only more mourning. Their warships floated silent in space. No new orders have been issued. They are paralyzed, Shul declared. A species drowning in sentiment. "No," Vec whispered. "What did you say?" the High Analyst asked. "I said no. This is not paralysis. It's cohesion." Laughter followed. Vec did not join. He replayed the footage of a human child, placing a photograph of her parents on a public wall. Soldiers passed, stopping to look at the pictures. One bowed his head. Another left a trinket. Ritualized empathy. Collective memory. This wasn't disorganization. It was synchronization. Vec requested permission to observe a human memorial in person. The council granted it out of amusement. "They cry while we sharpen our blades," Shul said, tone mocking. "Let the curator watch their downfall up close." Vec traveled to the nearest human-controlled station, posing as an Ilyari historian under diplomatic protection. There were no armed escorts. No suspicion. The humans greeted him politely. Curiously, he was brought to a hangar converted into a memorial. There were no banners. No propaganda. Just names. Tens of thousands, printed and glowing softly on translucent sheets. People stood silently, touching the names. Some wept. Others offered short, whispered stories. A woman lit a candle. A man sang an old earth lullaby, barely audible. The air was heavy with memory. In that moment, Vec understood something terrifying. This species had built a civilization not despite their pain, but around it. They carried their dead forward, not as weights, but as purpose. He returned to the council with footage, transcripts, and his own trembling voice. "They will respond," he warned. "And when they do, it will not be rage. It will be something colder, more precise. They are not weakened by their sorrow. They are forging themselves in it." The council dismissed his report, but Vec could no longer sleep, because he had seen them cry, and he knew what came next. The human outpost was quiet when Vec arrived. Not silent. There was always sound among them, but subdued, as if even the air respected their grief. No alarms, no drills, no marches. Just low voices, shared meals, hands on shoulders. Vec moved through them, unnoticed, just another diplomatic observer in a place that had seen too much loss. He cataloged what he could. Humans constructed temporary shrines beside walkways, cluttered with photographs, candles, and personal belongings. Soldiers knelt before them. Some whispered names. Others just stood and stared, faces unreadable. There were no orders to do this. It simply happened. Organic, synchronized without command. Vec was used to order. The Ilyari operated on strict hierarchy and predefined response. Death was a metric. Mourning was irrelevant. Efficiency was paramount. Here, nothing was efficient. It was chaotic, emotional, slow, and yet it functioned with startling cohesion. He entered a small observatory chamber, dimly lit. A human sat alone at a console. He wore a military uniform, not a high rank. Young, barely into adulthood by human standards. Vec watched from the shadows. The human held a chain, a small pendant hanging from it. He spoke quietly. "I'm sorry," the human said. "I should have been there." Vec's translator caught the words, but not their weight. The human wasn't communicating for data. He was reaching across an impossible gap to someone no longer present. His voice cracked. A pause. Then a tear slid down his cheek. Just one. Vec froze. That single act contained more complexity than any battle strategy he had ever studied. It was not weakness. It was remembrance, regret, love, all condensed into a gesture smaller than a breath. It defied logic. It transcended language. In that moment, Vec understood what the council had missed. The tear wasn't the end of strength. It was the beginning of it. This was how humans process loss. Not by erasing it, but by internalizing it, by becoming something more because of it. Every name remembered, every moment grieved, made them sharper. Later, in a communal hall, Vec listened as soldiers shared stories of those lost. There was no glorification, no vengeance, just memories. A pilot who always told bad jokes. A medic who sang during surgeries. Each detail became part of a collective identity. The dead were not gone. They had been woven into the fabric of the living. The next day, Vec returned to his vessel and recorded his findings. Emotional transmission is not a liability. It is their engine. Humans do not forget. They do not bury pain. They carry it forward. His report was dismissed. Again, the council had already decided. Their tears are a symptom of instability, the high analyst declared. Let them drown in them. But Vec disagreed, and now he said so. You mistake tears for surrender. But you forget they grieve first, and then they act. The council reminded him of protocol. He did not care. He watched again the footage he had taken, watched the soldier cry. That solitary moment of raw honesty. Tears, to the Ilyari, were nonsense. To humans, they were sacred. Proof that something mattered enough to be lost. Proof that memory held weight. That every life mattered. And if they believed that, truly believed it, then they would do anything to protect the next. Vec remembered standing among the humans, how they never asked him to leave, how they spoke of the dead like friends, even to a stranger. There was no performance, no strategy, just truth. And truth, he realized, was the sharpest weapon of all. He knew then what the others refused to see. These were not fragile creatures. These were beings who transformed grief into purpose, who wept before they fought, not because they feared battle, but because they understood what it cost. Vec closed the report with a final entry. I saw a human cry, and I understood, when the tears dry, they will rise. Not as mourners, but as avengers. We have not silenced them. We have ignited them. The council deleted his message, but the end had already started. Earth's orbit filled with silence. Not the kind born of fear, but of preparation. No declarations. No threats. Just orders transmitted in encrypted bursts. Fleets mobilized. Satellites reoriented. Names were assigned to each operation. Names of the fallen. There was no ceremony, no vengeance shouted into the stars. Only a quiet, chilling efficiency. Human commanders met behind sealed doors. Intelligence was reviewed. Suspicions confirmed. The Ilyari had struck. Twice. Clean, surgical eliminations meant to test response thresholds. The Ilyari expected panic or retaliation. What they received was discipline. Orbital shipyards shifted to wartime output within hours. Advanced AI systems, many still classified, were activated. Protocols that hadn't seen use in decades were pulled from archives. Every maneuver rehearsed. Every launch marked not with pride, but resolve. Human fleets did not speak of justice. They simply moved forward. The first strike came without warning. A hidden Ilyari comms array deep in neutral space vanished. No survivors. No trace. Hours later, a second facility, this one embedded in a civilian sector, shielded by treaties, was reduced to inert metal. Still, no broadcasts. No accusations. The Ilyari Council began to fracture. They hadn't expected this. Humans, they believed, were impulsive. They assumed retaliation would be loud, predictable, emotional. Instead, the humans had become silent architects of consequence. Council meetings grew tense. Analysts demanded explanations. Some accused Vec of disinformation. He said nothing. They had refused to hear him before. Now, they were hearing something louder than words: precision. The humans weren't just attacking military targets. They were dismantling infrastructure, weakening supply routes, targeting without pattern, without rhetoric. It wasn't war. It was disassembly, one piece at a time. In the human command centers, no one celebrated. Every report of a successful strike was met with silence. Then another order. They had not forgotten the dead. They were carrying them forward. Each decision, each target, weighed against the lives already lost. The mission wasn't revenge. It was memory. The Ilyari attempted diplomatic outreach. Messages were sent. This is a misunderstanding. We seek de-escalation. No response. Another relay vanished. They tried open broadcasts, appealing to reason. Humanity never replied. In desperation, the Council offered reparations, trade agreements, territorial concessions, anything to make the silence stop. It didn't. Vec watched the panic grow. He knew it wasn't just the losses. It was the way humanity inflicted them. Cold, controlled, emotionally silent. Because the Ilyari knew rage. They had systems to suppress it. But what they were facing now was far worse. Purpose. The Ilyari tried to adapt. Their fleets repositioned. Defensive grids were reinforced. But it was too late. The humans had already breached their rhythm. Predictability had become a weapon, and humanity wielded it with terrifying precision. Vec, now seen as a traitor by many of his kind, made a decision. He reached out through unofficial channels. A single encrypted message. I understand. I saw the tear. I know what it meant. A reply came. Then you already know the answer. He offered intelligence, not as a bargain, but as a confession. The Ilyari would not survive what they had triggered, because humanity had remembered the dead. And memory, for them, was never passive. It was fuel. Vec no longer sought to preserve the Ilyari. He sought to record the truth before it was erased. The war wasn't one of domination. It was rectification. The humans did not aim to control the Ilyari. They aimed to make sure no one else would ever feel what they had felt. To ensure that no colony, no family, no child would be taken without consequence. Each attack was surgical. Each fleet moved with mechanical grace. No speeches, no celebrations, just quiet, relentless motion. And through it all, the humans remembered the names. That, Vec realized, was the true weapon. Not ships, not bombs, but the weight of every name spoken in silence. And it was only just beginning. The Ilyari Empire had always relied on superiority, of numbers, of strategy, a belief in their own permanence. They had broken civilizations with mathematics and dismantled resistance with logic. But now their projections failed. Their assumptions faltered. The humans weren't responding like anything they had encountered. And the consequences multiplied. Industrial sectors vanished in hours. Docks went dark. Entire shipyards ceased transmissions. Human strike teams moved without patterns, their objectives clearly informed by intelligence the Ilyari had believed secure. Defense algorithms became obsolete. Tactical predictions collapsed under human unpredictability. Within weeks, the Ilyari military lost control of 4 outer systems. Not through conquest, through collapse. Supply chains ruptured, morale fractured. Civilian colonies received warnings, brief and final: evacuate. Then the infrastructure disappeared. No atrocities, no spectacles. The humans didn't broadcast their strength. They simply demonstrated it, over and over, without pause or commentary. On Earth, families still visited memorials. New names were still etched into transparent stone. The tears hadn't stopped, but neither had the resolve. The pain wasn't fading. It was evolving. Where once there was sorrow, now there was focus. And across the stars, that focus hit like a pressure wave. Ilyari leadership attempted to consolidate, drawing surviving fleets into a central stronghold. Their mistake was assuming humanity sought total destruction. But humanity wasn't interested in empires. They were interested in meaning. Every Ilyari system they bypassed proved it. Humanity wasn't hunting territory. They were dismantling legacy. Then, without announcement, the human fleet halted its expansion. Communications went silent. Ilyari analysts, desperate to understand, speculated a pause for regrouping, internal instability, exhaustion. They were wrong. The humans were finished. They had taken back nothing and occupied no planets. What they had done instead was eradicate every node involved in the attacks. Every official, every command ship, every production line that had touched the operation. They had mapped the network of guilt and erased it route by route. Then they left. No conditions, no ultimatums, just silence. The Ilyari Council, what was left of it, sat in what had once been a secure chamber, now stripped of its status and certainty. None spoke. There was nothing left to say. They had underestimated humanity, not because they thought them weak, but because they didn't understand strength in its human form. Strength was never in the weapons. It was in memory. Vec, no longer exiled, submitted his final report. It wasn't tactical. It wasn't data. It was a single sentence. They cried, and then they made sure no one else would. There was no celebration from the humans. No monuments to victory. Only the same process that had begun everything. Remembrance. They didn't count conquests. They counted names. They didn't seek domination. They sought peace. Not the shallow kind born of treaties, but the enduring kind built by making grief impossible to repeat. And Ilyari, for all their cold brilliance, had never imagined that the most dangerous species in the galaxy would be the one that cried before it fought. Because those tears meant every life lost mattered. And when every life matters, then vengeance isn't rage. It's purpose. And purpose cannot be predicted. It can only be survived.